When looking for the king of podcasts, you're at the wrong channel.
Well, excuse me!
Looking for good ideas for life? You're far from good hands.
Hey, bud, what's your problem?
If you think the listener is always right, you're far from the right place.
Out of order! Even in the future, nothing works!
Hosted by a Northeasterner by birth, but a rebel by choice.
Are you threatening me?
If you want a host that floats between love and madness,
and we know the night is always gonna be here anyway. Thinking of you's working up my appetite. Looking forward to a little afternoon delight.
then play on and listen to Crazy Train Radio.
All right, guys, listen to this blues riff and B. Watch me for the changes and try and keep up, okay?
Within the gaming world, there are your general gamers, but then there are those that enjoy the dark underbelly of gaming. If you're one of those that enjoy the dark underbelly of gaming, we certainly got the place to send you. Scorpion Lair Games. That's right, Scorpion Lair Games is the creators of the true crime hit Killers, the card game. Let's not forget they also have Killers Clothing Company, their profiler game, and things like the 5-Minute Murder channel on YouTube. And we certainly can't forget the new book that is certainly a hit, Beyond the Headliners, True Crimes, Myths, and Legends. Make sure you visit Jeff and the Scorpion Lair Games on Facebook and everywhere today.
Hey, I'm Dillon Brown, the founder of Horror Nerd Productions and Horror Dads Productions, and you are checking out Crazy Train Radio.
In darkness you will find me. I dance among the dead. But very soon I'll need to hunt the scent of blood instead. Rising from your earth bed, it thickens in the air. A smell gone sweetly rancid. I know that you are near.
Hey folks, it's your least favorite host in the podcast world, Croc, Jonathan Steele. And boy, do we have a good one for you today. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, childrens of all ages, this next guest is a man who wears many hats, both personally as a husband and father, but also on the professional side, running 2 different independent film production companies. But he's also a writer, actor, director, producer, and just does it all. So the main company, Horror Dads Production, is certainly something to look forward to. A couple of his projects already are out on streaming platforms such as Tubi as we speak. So let's go ahead and welcome Mr. Dillon Brown.
Well, hello there!
So, Mr. Dillon Brown, how the hell are you, sir?
I'm good, man. I recovered from the fun holiday sickness that, of course, happens always when family's around, and finally on the mend, so that's good.
We'll just blame the toddler, that's all.
Always.
Especially they go to preschool and all that shit,
Dude, it's just a never-ending cycle of sickness in this house, I swear.
Well, I do want to thank Mr. Aaron from A&B Horror Movies for making this connection. So, boy, do you have a lot on your plate. So, well, I can go a couple different directions, but why don't we start in general with doing horror nerd productions and horror dads? Yeah, what's the difference between the two?
So, Horror Nerd Productions is my like personal company here in Reno, Nevada that I started right around COVID. I was home a lot. I work for the Department of Defense on a military base, and they were shut down for a little bit. And so some of us that were able to telework were sent home for long periods of time while we were trying to figure out, how to adjust with that reality. And I had always wanted to get into filmmaking, and I thought, well, I'm home a lot. I'm not on base. I have a lot of time, so maybe this is the time to get started. So Horror Nerd was my own, personal brand, but it started to turn into one of those things where I was noticing there was a lot of guys like me out there that were just getting started, and so I started making some connections with some guys in some found footage horror movie groups, and we realized that we all sort of had the same goal, and so we kind of figured if we joined forces, we could share networking. And since Josh Brucker, who I kind of connected with first, he was on the other side of the country for me. I'm in Nevada. He's over in Illinois. We thought, well, that's a good way to sort of, reach out to another end of the country. And then we just kept adding more and more guys. And then the Horror Dads was born. We figured we would all band together, and yeah, we may not always be on each other's sets, or we may not be super involved in what everybody's doing physically, but we're always there for like moral support, to offer feedback when we're watching footage, help each other network and share, stuff. And it's just turned into this really awesome group of guys. And everybody's a dad. Everybody has a career. We all just sort of do this stuff on the side. And so it's just like a group of like-minded individuals that got together to make horror movies.
Nice. So, obviously, one of your major deals that you've done so, but before I go there, what is it like, and how difficult would you say, from your perspective, since getting involved, the independent? So, as I was going to mention, is how difficult would you say things can be with being an independent producer, director, writer, just all the things that go into independent film?
It's, like on a scale of 1 to 10, I would put it at an 11. It's one of those things where you start to realize really big successful productions move the way they do because of money, right? They have so much money and they have so many people, and in our world, we're really kind of scraping for whatever pennies we can, and we're trying to find ways to cut costs any way possible. And we're super limited on crew usually. I mean, most of the time I've got actors doubling as crew members. Crew members suddenly turn into actors when we have an actor that doesn't show up all of a sudden, and we're screwed because we're out on location and I've got everybody else there, and it's like, hey, guess what? You were going to maybe help me do special effects today. Well, how are you at reciting some lines? Because we're down a person. So you just have to be super, super fluid. You have to be really open to making decisions on the fly. And it can be really difficult. I mean, even for myself, now it's kind of become expected, and it's like natural that I know those things are going to happen. I can sort of forecast for them. But I mean, more power to anybody that gets involved in indie film, because you will have a lot of things thrown at you that you can't just fix with money, or you can't just fix by throwing a bunch of people at it to go fix it for you so you can focus on other things. On my productions, I'm director, scripty, sound guy, special effects guy, sometimes makeup, wardrobing, location scout. It's just you have to wear a lot of hats. And so, yeah, I would say it's incredibly difficult, but I also think that's why it's so rewarding when you get a finished product is, hey, against all odds, we still made this, so it makes you really proud of what you get at the end.
Absolutely. And I feel the same boat doing what I do the past 12 years. I do all aspects. And part of my problem is, and we'll go back to you in a second, is being afraid to release some of that because I built at this point a certain standard for myself. So do you find that for you as well?
Absolutely. I've had people offer and say, hey, if you'd like to sit back and just direct, I can run camera for you or whatever. And I always just say no, because I've sort of grown accustomed to watching my productions come to life through the lens, because I am the one, uh, working the camera. And so it does become hard to relinquish some control. And it's one of those things I also want to work on in future productions is, instead of throwing so much at myself and getting so stressed out, if there are people willing to work, I've got to be able to start giving some trust, into some people that have worked with me a lot. They're picking up what my style is, so I'm sure that they're going to eventually be able to mimic things that I do, and then maybe I can sit back and direct a little bit. But it's weird for me. I got hired to do a short film one time it was the first time I directed something that I didn't cast, like with people I was really familiar with. I didn't write the script for it. This was a total, hey, we have this project. We need a director. If we hire you, could you come in and shoot this thing? Yeah, sure. And it was so strange for me to sit in a director chair with headphones on and just kind of watch a monitor. And yeah, I was directing, but I just didn't feel that same passion that I have when I'm actually like in the shit. It's like I felt like I was watching this battle from the sidelines when I really want to be like in the middle of it all. So I definitely like to take on probably more than I should, and it's taught me to not complain when things get tough, because I am taking that burden on myself. But I get what you mean. When you have a standard you've sort of set, it's really hard to relinquish that control to somebody else and hope that they can match it.
Well, back to actual film, as we are concerned here. And you mentioned when we started about the found footage community. And obviously, most people would think of Blair Witch as, I
Yep.
guess, the first film to really start that subgenre, I guess you would call it. So, what do you think? And we'll talk about your projects as well within that field, but with the found footage community and subgenre, what makes it different compared to other parts of the horror world and just film in general?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because we do talk in the community a lot about being different, about kind of being like the outcasts of the horror community many times. I think there's this kind of stigma that, if you watch found footage movies or you make found footage movies, that you're into, you know, cheap, poorly made crap. And I think so many people, when they think of found footage, they just think, oh, it must just be nothing more than shaky cam, and that's it. And that's for people that don't know what they're doing or don't know how to make movies. But really, when we've had those discussions, it's almost the opposite of that. When you're making a found footage movie, you have one of the hardest things ever going against you, and that's usually you only have one point of view the entire movie. You don't get to just pull away like other traditional films and show from this like omniscient point of view things that you want the audience to see, but the characters don't see. And in found footage, you're seeing it specifically through the eyes of the characters, and so it becomes really hard to pull off practical effects, because you have to figure out, how do I get my actors to, move this camera around in a way that hides our special effect we're trying to pull off, but still looks like they're moving around or naturally moving the camera. And you have to pull these things off sometimes in one take, and it becomes really, really cumbersome. But I think found footage people, especially the fans, I think they really band together because they have heard from so many people, oh, you like to watch that garbage and you watch this and that. And they look at it as, no, I like that immersive experience. I like to feel like I'm in it with the characters because I'm seeing it through their eyes. And so a really well-made found footage movie can be scarier than shit because you don't know what's lurking out there. You're stuck with what they're seeing, and you're kind of on that ride with them. Now, having said that, it is unfortunately a genre that is maligned, with kind of 90% of what's out there is bad and rough to sit through. And so you do have to sift through a lot of movies to find the gems in there. And, so I definitely understand both viewpoints. But what's really cool in found footage is so many amateur filmmakers got their start in found footage, and they were close to the fans that way because we're marketing in these big groups. There's a couple of Facebook groups, that have 100,000 followers or 100,000 members in the groups, and that's free marketing to put our movies out there. And so you get a lot of banter back and forth with the community who watches the films, and then the community making the films. And there's a closeness there that a lot of other, I think, traditional films don't really bridge that gap. You can't really reach out to a lot of those directors. Now, some absolutely, but it's just like, it's a close-knit community. It can be rough. There's always the haters. There's always going to be people who will say your work is shit and it's the worst movie they've ever seen. It's always my favorite. It's always the worst thing they've ever seen. But for the most part, it's a really good community.
Well, I'm first to say that my work is the shit, but that's a whole nother conversation for another time.
He gonna shit when he realizes it's shit. Who got the lighter?
Oh, wait. Oh, did I say that publicly again? Oh, well. Well, speaking of found footage products, I guess what brought you to the dance would be Tahoe Joe and Tahoe Joe 2. And from what I understand, it was an unscripted experiment that worked. So what led to that concept and theory?
So yeah, I had dabbled in a couple of found footage movies before. Two movies. They were not very successful. The first one I did was like any first time filmmaker. It's going to be rough, and I got torn apart. And so I immediately jumped back in the saddle. I made my second film called The Flock, and it was significantly bigger, but I kind of had that first taste of biting off more than I could chew. I had a really huge story, but not really the budget and the crew to pull it off. Now, I'm very happy with what we were able to do. I look back on it, I laugh at some stuff that I would have totally done different at this point. But that film, I actually met my co-star of Tahoe Joe, Michael Rock, while we shot that movie.
Who was a Green Beret, correct?
Yes, yeah. Mike is a former Green Beret.
Sir, do we get the win this time?
And he still works in government capacity. He works for a 3-letter agency, actually thwarting child sex crimes. He tracks down pedophiles, and he's for lack of a better term, he's a bad motherfucker. And I love Mike. I love all the work that he does. But he really wanted to get into the film side because he was using film to kind of break away from that life, that real life stuff. He wanted that escape. And so we were chatting at the premiere of The Flock, and I pulled him to the side and I was like, hey, I really want to do a Bigfoot movie. I've kind of got this idea. I don't know if you're really down or not, but I had a lot of fun working with you. And Mike's looking at me like, oh, cool, Bigfoot. And I think he's thinking, oh boy, like a cheap, low budget Bigfoot movie. This ought to be real great for my career, And so I knew I was going to have to to somehow seal the deal. And I told him, I said, I want to film it like a fake documentary, but I want it to feel as realistic as possible. So I shot like the first 5-minute opening and I sent it to him, and he was hooked. He's like, okay. He's like, I can really get on board with this because we're kind of playing ourselves, like fictionalized versions of ourselves. But he got really on board with the idea of making it look like it was a true story. And we kind of had this true crime element to it with a missing persons case. And yeah, so we realized trying to do something to feel real was not going to work if I wrote it. Like, I was not going to be able to write natural dialogue for a former Green Beret. I wanted him to be able to say things and do things that would be natural to him in a situation. Like if we were just out in the woods and something, happened, I didn't want to guess. I wanted him to do it, and then I would follow that lead with the camera, like an actual documentary crew would. And Mike and I just we found that we had this weird kind of almost telepathy where we could look at each other and kind of knew where the next person was going without even having to talk about it. And it was like a happy accident. It completely worked, totally experimental. And really, since then, we've attacked most of our projects the same way, where I've written some stuff out in more detail since that project, but we like to keep things open and flowing, and it just works for us. I know for a lot of people that having that control is their safety net, but for us, the safety net is, hey, if something goes wrong, we can act natural to it, and we'll find a way to integrate that into the plot.
I meant to do it.
Exactly right.
But, it's funny, and I know some of the shots, especially in the first one, you purposely want it bad because of the costume, but in part 2, and I know 3 has been announced, you are happier with how the costume and certain things have improved, obviously, along the way, which obviously we've talked about doing a lot of the work and design yourself, wanting that control a little bit ago. But also Ghost, which is on Tubi. Check out. Is Trader or Tahoe Joe on Tubi as well?
Yeah. Tahoe Joe and Tahoe Joe 2 are both on Tubi as well.
Nice. Which, that kind of thing is good for independent, the different outlets, your Amazons, your Tubis, your this, just all the different options. But what are you, and I catch shit for this, but I just log people into my one streaming service, which is hence the break there. But what do you think of all the different outlets, but also physical medium? Because I'm a big physical media guy.
Yeah, I love it. I always get my stuff on disc. We did a Tahoe Joe and Tahoe Joe 2 Blu-ray double disc, Ghost. I always get everything on physical media because I'm the same way. I don't feel like I'm giving somebody a product if I just give them a link to a streaming service. I love when I have something tangible that they can order from us and I can sign a disc, and we say, here it is. And I also know that, those outlets are there. It's amazing, but those films will not be up there forever. They will be cycled on and off, and, eventually those things will disappear from Tubi and Amazon or wherever. And I like knowing that the physical media is there to preserve them, when they do eventually disappear. Now, places like Tubi have been a godsend for us because it pays really well per view. There's been a little bit of a drop recently, but for the most part, Tubi has really helped a lot of people generate some funding to be able to do their next projects. And Tubi's got 80 plus million subscribers, and so you have this huge amount of people you can get your work out to. And, 10 years ago, you couldn't do that. You didn't really have an option to just throw stuff out there and boom, it's on these big, well-known streaming services. And now with, places like Film Hub where you can package your stuff and then it can get pitched to those places. And Tubi being one of the best because they really do support small indie films. They are always, accepting really low-budget projects that help get filmmakers out there. And I don't know a single indie filmmaker that doesn't have some sort of, I think gratitude towards Tubi because it's a free service. It's got a ton of good movies on it. I mean, when I can log into Tubi and see my movie in the recommended section and it's sitting next to Terminator 2, I'm like elated, right? Like, I know that doesn't really mean anything, but just knowing that other people could log in and see that, it's like, holy shit, I worshipped those movies with Arnold Schwarzenegger and all that stuff as a kid, and now here's my movie poster sitting right next to theirs on the same streaming service. It's really surreal. It's really cool.
So you mentioned it there, and I'm not looking for specifics because I'm not the IRS and all that. I could care less. So you said, how does that structure work? You said it's per viewing. Did they take care of you guys, or?
Yeah, I think, now I don't want to be quoted and then have somebody watch this and be like, no, you're totally wrong. But my understanding was you're paid by the amount of ads that run during your film. So, if somebody watches your whole movie and it allows like 4 ads to run, you'll get your maximum return that way. But if they turn it off halfway through and only 2 ads came up, then you only get paid for, I think, those 2 ads. So obviously, you want people to watch the whole thing all the way through instead of starting it and shutting it off to get your maximum money out of it. Now, that's, like I say, that's kind of how it was explained to me.
Now, is it would it be like a quarterly thing, like other things?
Yeah, they send
like
out
a royalty setup.
Yeah, they're always behind, of course. It's like you might be getting paid for quarter 3 and quarter 1 of the next year, but they're always trying to catch up. But yeah, it's usually done quarterly.
Yeah, I got your money.
So the other thing I heard you talking with Aaron about, and yes, he goes, steal my questions. I said, dude, that's not my style, but this one I am. But you mentioned about, with your conversation with him, horror comedy seemed like a fun thing to do. So is that something that you could see yourself doing in the near future, or is that something further down the line you're looking at?
Yeah, I sort of find that naturally we inject some comedy into a lot of our stuff. I love to watch really, really scary movies, but I don't necessarily try to make really scary movies. I'm more of a B movie fan, and I like to make those types of movies that I rented as a kid that, like low budget creature features and stuff. So I'm never going to be the filmmaker that's trying to make the scariest thing you've ever seen. And I'm totally cool with admitting that. I actually prefer to make stuff that will have some people laugh because I feel like horror and comedy just go so hand in hand. And so, it's funny because I don't necessarily have like a plan to shoot a full-blown horror comedy anytime soon, even though I would like to at some point. But I noticed that even when I'm not planning to do it, we still find ways to inject some comedy into it. And the film that I'm going to be working on next, it's called A Man in the Woods with an Axe, is a very, very heavy nod to like 80s woods set slasher films where, you have your group of teens that go out into the woods and then there's always some kind of backwoods killer out there. And my plan is to give everybody exactly what they're expecting with that, almost to a fault, but it's going to completely flip itself on its head too with some plans that I have to where it becomes something entirely different. And I know with the premise and what I've already got written, there will be some comedy in it just by default because of what we're doing. And I'm totally embracing that. Like if it ends up being funnier than I was even expecting, I'm not going to try and dissuade that from happening. I think I'll just naturally see where it goes. And I have a lot of really great ideas brewing for scenes and stuff like that that may come across, a little more comical than I was maybe originally intending. And if it starts to do that, that's where I'm totally cool with being fluid as a filmmaker and saying, you know what, we have such a fun group of people here together. And it seems like you guys keep coming up with these hilarious one-liners. Like, let's just embrace it. Let's go for it. And so I never really know. I don't really ever go into anything saying it has to be this way quite frankly, because I don't have the funding to make sure it happens that way every single time. I have to really just see where it naturally is going to lead me.
Right on. Now, I guess final question for you, and thank you for the time.
Yeah.
When you're sitting back and watching stuff, just trying to be entertained since you've been getting into things, why is it Jurassic Park that's your favorite film?
Oh man,
And I'm saying this because I didn't get that from anywhere. I didn't seen three different things behind you.
yeah, I my parents took me to see the movie when I was 7 years old. I was always a dinosaur nut as a little kid, like most little kids are. And I remember they were promoting the film on some news outlet was talking about, this groundbreaking film from Steven Spielberg was coming to theaters. And I started to obsess over it, and I wanted to read the book, but I was only 7. And my parents were saying, well, it's quite, elevated for you. You're not going to really understand what's going on. And, but we'll talk about the movie. We'll see. So they went to go see it on opening night because they wanted to. They didn't know at the time. They had no idea if it'd be appropriate for me, if it would scare me to death. I think my dad's biggest fear was taking me to the theater and having me freak out and ruin everybody else's experience. So they went and screened it. I'm on pins and needles at my aunt's house, staying, to see when they come back to pick me up, and they both said, we're going to take you tomorrow for sure. You have to see this movie. And I remember both of my parents. This is such a vivid memory, but my dad especially had this look when he was telling my aunt and uncle. He said, I've never seen anything like this. It's like the Wizard of Oz for our generation. And I was looking at him and I'm thinking, oh, if my dad's that excited, I'm going to love this. So they took me to see the movie, and I was jaw on the floor, silent. I mean, like the entire movie. I was 7 years old, a 2-hour movie, and I didn't move. I didn't take a bathroom break. I sat completely mesmerized. And to this day, it just does the same thing to me. There's an epic feeling of like child wonderment coupled with true horror. Unbelievable effects, especially the giant Stan Winston, puppetry and animatronics are just mind blowing still. And yeah, it just has this hold on me, and it's that movie to me that showed me what movies can be, what they should be, and why I love watching them.
So, that's funny you say that your parents said, all right, we're going to go screen it and make our decision based on what we say. Is that how you think you roll as a parent? I'm gonna view this, then decide whether my kid or kids should watch whatever it
Yeah,
is.
a lot of it is like that. I have a 12-year-old stepson, and he's starting to get into wanting to watch more horror movies. And I have seen some horror movies now when I've really done some deep dives and tried to watch just about everything I can. I've seen some stuff that has messed me up as a 39-year-old. Certain films like Martyrs or a Serbian film, and I don't even like that movie, but I sought him out. I wanted to see what it was all about. One of my favorite movies is the French extremism film Inside, and those are really hardcore films that I do not want my 12-year-old to watch, just simply because I don't think he's ready to be exposed to that stuff yet, because he doesn't really understand special effects yet, and he doesn't really get that subject matter. So yeah, I definitely want to screen things. But having said that, if he was to come to me and has a real true passion and say, I really want to see this movie, I've been reading about it, or I watch YouTube videos on it, I really want to watch it, I'm totally open to sitting with him and watching it too. So then we can have those discussions if he does get freaked out, or if he wants to ask me what's going on, and I'm open to that too. I would rather, I think, sit with him and watch those truly scary things if he's down, than have him find them with his friends and then maybe be a little bit affected by it. I do remember sneaking a VHS tape from the video store a long time ago with my friends, and we grabbed Event Horizon on a blind buy or a blind rental. I was